Hey Savvy people, it's Savvy Nick here, and today we have a special stream. I'm here with Josh, and we're going to be playing Veloren, asking a few questions that have come in from the community posts as well as Discord. So if you haven't already, make sure to join that Discord for us and subscribe below so you can keep on top of these streams. Welcome, Josh. You can say hello if you got a second. All right, so what we're going to be doing is, I think I've added most of the people to the party. If I haven't already, make sure to post it in the chat. Let's see, I think MK is missing here. So we'll be exploring the wilderness a little bit. Let's see, where are we going today? I know that the mountains are beautiful. Do you have any suggestions, Josh?
I personally quite like the snowy areas. So
Snowy areas.
I wonder whether
Sweet. You and I both.
maybe north to a dungeon in the snowy areas.
Love it.
As that.
That sounds perfect. That's exactly where I'm
I see
pointing
one on the other end of the snowy area, which means a lot of gliding over lakes.
Beautiful. All right, you're thinking like Treen layer or so? You see that one up there? It's a very, it's one of the hard ones. Okay, perfect. So that's where we'll be going on to.
Sounds fun.
And then we got Sarah already suggesting stuff for us. Skull Island. Well, welcome everyone to the stream. I see people dropping in. We got Obadad. Hey there, MK. Nice to see you. Joshua. Finally starting to get into Arch. Congratulations there, Joshua. All right, so we're going to start going. I'm already going the wrong direction. We want to go north.
Yeah.
So while we're slowly making our way here, we are going to be asking questions to Josh. And let's see. We'll start with the first question right away. Might as well. So the first question I have for you is, how did you get into programming?
Okay. I actually started out when I was a lot younger. When I was probably about 11 or 12, using a program called Game Maker. So this might be a thing that a few of you have used. It was basically a sort of a visual editor for games, and it had a simple scripting language called GML. And it wasn't particularly powerful. It wasn't sort of particularly fancy, but it could do things like drawing sprites to the screen and playing music and stuff like that.
Get you all excited about development.
At the time, just yeah.
No, that's awesome.
I mean, it started to allow me to understand that you could make a computer do pretty much arbitrary things if you gave it the right inputs and stuff like that, and that was a real eye opener for me. And
that's
I was hooked at that point.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people kind of start that direction. You know, they piece together some stuff and then they realize, okay, maybe I can do this on my own, and start actually getting into the nitty-gritty of programming. Let's see here. We got Callie. We're going to put them in the party. I don't see Callie, Sarah, so make sure to let me know what the actual name is. Maybe I'm just missing it. All right, so next question I have for you is, how long have you been programming then?
Well, I guess GML probably counts as the proper programming language. I mean, it's Turing complete, so I guess now about 12 years.
Wow.
Oh, that's scary, 12 years.
Goes by fast, doesn't it? That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see here. Just messing with my graphics. 71, 72. Let me change that down a little bit. Okay. And then the next question is, what types of projects have you worked on or been part of? So, you know, group projects or your own, whatever you like, or whatever spiked your interest enough to talk about.
I would say that I'm mostly sort of a curious person in my own right, so I tend to just work on a lot of weekend projects and stuff.
Sure.
I've experimented with things like doing some compiler development or
Oh, really?
rendering and so on.
That sounds like something I'd pull my hair out doing.
I quite enjoy it actually. I find constructing programming languages to be quite a beautiful process actually.
That's awesome. Well, that says something about you. I'll tell you that.
Really interesting logic and problem solving that goes into writing a programming language.
Yeah. And now, have you always been interested in this kind of stuff, or is it kind of sparked from? Did you go to university? Did you, or you just kind of picked up on this?
Yes.
Oh, you did. Okay.
I'd say I probably learnt more in my spare time than I did at university itself. Which is not to say that it was useless, of course, but I think I'm the kind of person that sort of went home and went, oh, well, screw the syllabus. I'm going to work on my own thing.
No, I got you. You sound like a lone wolf.
I spent most of the university working on an OS kernel,
oh, wow.
which didn't really go anywhere eventually. I got my dissertation.
Gotcha. Oh, wow. So you went pretty far into uni. Can't say I went that far. That's writing dissertations. You were trying to get a doctorate or a master's.
No. So, well, I attempted a master's, but unfortunately, various health problems meant that I wasn't able to complete it. But...
Gotcha. Yeah, I was gonna.
COVID got in the way, of course.
Oh my. plenty against you there. Yeah, I didn't even attempt. Excuse me. I didn't even attempt going into a master's degree. I got bored of it real quick. Like you said, I'm kind of a lone wolf when it comes to things too. I just kind of like doing my own thing, having my own projects, even though, I got a day job or whatever. But definitely one of those things, I don't know, I could do without it and do my own thing at all times, and I'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same place. I'm okay with doing uni work and so on, but it's not really fun unless you feel motivated to do it on your own terms.
Exactly, that's a big thing, and I think a lot of people struggle with that. It's hard to motivate yourself. I don't know. There's just so much to do too. It's like not only the motivation, it's also the kind of like constant distraction. At least in my world. I'm always trying to do too many things at once. I guess that's the way of putting it. So with that being said, what is the most frustrating part of open source programming, or just programming in general for you? Or is there anything that you find frustrating?
Frustrating. I would say bad documentation. I think that's a thing the open source world really needs to improve upon. And understandably, it's not the sort of thing that people want to do.
Right. That's a really
I'm guilty of not writing very good documentation, but it is really important,
yeah, absolutely.
There is a sad lack of it in the open source world, although that is improving.
Gotcha.
Tools like the Archwiki and so on are
and do you think
absolutely invaluable.
Do you think that's partially for, kind of lack of, I don't want to say lack of leadership, but sort of lack of leadership where, people who are contributing might not understand or how to actually make that documentation so it's useful, and, people in business, you're kind of forced to do it. There's no way around it. You're getting paid to do it, so you have to do it. But in open source, it's kind of the opposite, right? I mean, you're donating your time basically. So
yeah. So I think broadly people know what good documentation is on an intuitive level, because they're also the ones that end up needing to work on projects or need to read it themselves, and so they need to know what good docs are. But there's a real problem, I think, in open source where, of course, most of it's done without a profit motive, and that's fine. But it means that because people don't get paid for their work, they end up feeling like their project is just a weekend project. It's not the essential brick in the tech stack that it may eventually turn out to be.
Right.
And there are a lot of examples of projects that are just weekend projects that someone's created on a whim, and then they've actually become a foundational part of something a lot larger.
Sure.
And I don't think open source has yet learned how to properly migrate from that weekend project style of doing development to much larger projects. I mean, you have large open source projects run by companies like Canonical and Red Hat and so on. And they're great and they're well documented, but there's no real sense of transition between a thing that someone wrote on their personal GitHub and a project that's at that scale.
Yeah, no, that's a great mention. That is a frustrating part. I can agree with you, because even some other open source projects that I've kind of tried visiting, and I don't know, some simple stuff, just like installing it, the lack of documentation makes it really hard to install sometimes and just get your development environment ready. That's very frustrating. I can totally agree with that. Well, we're going to say hi to the chat real quick. Thanks everyone for joining in today, this special stream. So, Nitesh, no, you're not late. We'll be asking questions first directly from the posts that were received in the community, as well as on Discord. So if you missed out on those this time around, there will be more of these. So make sure to watch out for the YouTube community, as well as join in on Discord so you can ask questions. We'll try and maybe get to some chat questions at the very end of things. But right now, we're making our way to the Mountain of Doom. We're taking our time here, going north. We have a very nice party going. I hope I didn't miss anybody, and if I did, make sure to spam that chat inside of Veloren. I'll add you in. Nick, say them. Dev says hi to you, Josh, and let's see what else we got. Arch is finally on Linux 5.10, so they got the 5.10 kernel. That's amazing. Getting there. Hope everyone's doing well. Happy New Year to everyone. Hope your holidays were great. Hopefully you have a few more days off before you have to really get into the kick of things again. Val, hey there. Nice to see you in the chat. Thanks so much. I think we're breaking records here, Josh. We already have over 20 people concurrently viewing the stream. Thanks so much for stopping in, everyone. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to get hundreds of views on this. And to make sure we do, make sure to smash the living crap out of that like button for the YouTube overlord to start listening to us. All right, so we're going to continue on with more questions if you're ready, Josh.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. So you kind of already answered this one. So, well, yes and no. The next question was, how do you navigate that frustration that you have? So you mentioned that lack of documentation in the open source community. Is there any way to fix that?
Yes. So I think there are definitely a number of projects that have really excelled at providing really good documentation. I'd hold up the Rust programming language as an example of that.
Yes.
There are a lot of resources and they are extremely well written, and most of all, they don't assume that the reader is already an expert in a particular topic. They take a problem, like understanding, say, the complexities of the language itself, and they try to explain it from first principles, which is something I personally really appreciate. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that my brain doesn't really do jumping into complex topics well, so I really need a piece of documentation to explain everything from the ground up, and then I can pass what's going on. But I think what's really interesting about Rust is that they've managed to create this environment where people feel like they have enough investment in the project that they care about its upkeep beyond just adding a new feature. There are a lot of people in the community that are specifically dedicated to improving the error messages that the compiler generates, for example. And that, almost beyond features, is the thing that makes the language nice to work with, I think, because you write a piece of code that's wrong in a certain respect, and the compiler, rather than spitting out one of C++'s infamous 100-line errors when you forget a semicolon,
Yeah.
it just tells you that you've forgotten a semicolon, or
Right.
or it tells you that you've got a missing lifetime parameter here, or whatever. And it'll often try to suggest a fix. And
Yeah.
I think there's often a lot of elitism in the open source world. This
Sure.
sort of idea that sort of thing's bad. It's not sufficiently techy enough. It's not sufficiently hardcore enough. And
Yeah.
I think that sort of approach to things is really toxic, and something that the open source community is slowly working past.
Yep.
And it's really nice to see things becoming more accessible to a wider audience, because it only helps the community at
Right.
the end of the day.
Right. And you know what? Now that you mention that, it's very similar in the Linux community, actually. I don't know how much you get into the Linux community, but you have the different tiers of Linux distributions, and there is a little bit of elitism, depending on what Linux distribution you're using and what you had to do in order to set up that Linux distribution. Some people think they're a little, almost better than others because, they're not. They've basically progressed over the years, whereas other people are just starting out, and it's just a bad vibe all around sometimes when you get that kind of mentality, because it doesn't help anyone. How do you advance what you already have unless you get new people involved? Those you're not going to have the same developers around. You're not going to have the same maintainers. It's an interesting dynamic that people get stuck in. And I think it's going away though. I think it's becoming lesser and lesser. So I look forward to that.
I agree.
At least in the
think
Linux community.
I've been pleasantly surprised in the last year in particular, over the last few years, by how much the open source world has progressed. It's suddenly turned into this thing that's a real competitor, really competitive with existing tools.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really nice to see, and part of that is that the community has realized that, yes, good documentation matters, making things look good and be usable and accessible matters, and that isn't mutually exclusive with an environment that's also open and reveals all of the bits and pieces so that people can hack on them.
Right. All right, so if you're just stopping in, make sure to smash that like button. We got Josh here today, part of the Veloren team. He's a game developer, free and open source game developer. And we are just asking questions away from the community that were posted. We're also playing Veloren here, a game that he develops for. Let's see some of the chat here. Let's see. MX Linux KD on my second partition is having some serious regression after updates. I may need to drop that one. Well, good luck with that one. Arch by itself. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're running into there, Joseph. Let's see. You got a heart here from Foul. And then we got hello from K Ubuntu. Callie Katz, welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining in. Angel on Fira says hi, Josh. Let's see.
Hi.
Sai, all right.
Taking your place on Nick's stream.
We're doing a little better. We were having some issues before the stream, just trying to get audio sorted out. And again, thanks, Josh, for being so accommodating. You really helped me out on that. I'll definitely be using this method in the future. Hello, welcome to the stream. And Sai, welcome to the stream. Thank you for stopping by. Victor, hey there. All right, we'll continue on these questions that we have for you, Josh, if you're ready. Let's see first before we do. We're getting close already to that tree liar. Treen.
We just have another 2 mountain ridges to go.
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome. That's a very hard dungeon. So down a Burquin Crib, difficulty level 5, and this one is 2. We're about to see if we have a new Dungeon of Doom. All right, so
Oh my goodness, I apologize for the quality of the name generator. thereof.
We'll move on to the questions again. So, let's see. Do you have or actually, first off, what programming languages are you fluent in?
I think fluency is hard to sort of define, of course. I mean, I'm obviously most comfortable in Rust.
Yeah, let's define it as let's define it as something where a language you can jump into and actually contribute to, and let's say an open source project or something like that, without having to read too much documentation or review it.
I'd say quite a few. I think probably the more important aspect is what paradigms you're familiar with. If you're familiar with C, then jumping to a language that's not too distant to C is usually not too much of a problem. But if you're familiar with imperative programming and you jump to a functional language, it's often quite difficult to chew. I'd say that increasingly I've become more and more familiar with different paradigms and so on. I'm pretty good with functional programming now as a result of using Rust and also writing my own functional language. But
oh wow.
Yeah.
So wait, what do you call this functional language?
Really. I've given it the name Tau.
Tau.
For now.
Okay.
TOU.
TOU. So you have your own functional programming language called Tau, and may I ask where that name came from, if you want to share?
Oh, nowhere in particular. It was just short and
nice.
Easy to type.
Short and sweet.
For names for projects.
Hey, that sounds perfect to me. That's a great reason. All right, that's pretty cool. How long have you been messing with that?
On and off for about a year, to be honest. I've basically just been using it as a learning tool because I'm quite interested in compilers and type systems and type inference and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've been just screwing around with that.
Wow.
I found increasingly over time it's starting to move towards looking more and more like Haskell. So.
So are you trying to tell us something? Is there a perfect language?
I think Haskell as a language needs a bit more love than it gets, to be honest. It's an interesting language, perhaps not massively practical in some certain scenarios, although I'm sure a Haskell developer would disagree with me on that. But it's got enough interesting ideas that I wish other languages would learn from.
Okay, well, we'll ask one of the member questions. So those are mainly my questions there, but we'll move on to a couple member questions here. Just to grab one from chat real quick, we have CC Gouch saying, Josh, why Rust and not C++? Yandex said Rust isn't safe, lol. I think that's just the joke there, but well.
I think that sums it up. But, that aside, there's a lot of evangelism in the Rust community and on the other side as well, and it's often kind of hard to see the actual practical benefits of the language beyond that. You'll get people talking about memory safety, and that is an important and large feature, but I think beyond that, the way the language's type system allows you to basically encode properties of your program into the language in a way that allows the compiler to check them means it's really nice for working with code that manages a sort of a domain space where you need to be really careful about language state and so on. You'll often hear that mutability is the root of all evil, and I would tend to agree. But Rust constrains it to the extent that it can be used without threatening the integrity of a wider project. Mm-hmm. It makes it easier to use it correctly. I won't go into exactly how, because that's...
yeah, you could probably talk about that for hours,
That's
right?
a very big topic.
Right.
I would encourage everybody listening to to at least give it a go. And even if you don't end up using it, I think it's got a lot of useful features that are worth being aware of when you're working with other kinds of code.
And when you're saying it, are you talking about Rust in particular, or
Rust,
what?
yeah.
Okay. Just making sure.
Rust in particular, but it does borrow from enough other languages that you'll see these kind of ideas elsewhere as well. For instance, in Haskell.
Okay, so next question from a member here. What's the history behind the name Veloren? If I'm even pronouncing that right. Some like to emphasize the O. Veloren.
I think if you go far back enough in the Discord chat, the name, I can't remember exactly. I think I first mentioned sort of translating words into other languages that sounded nice, and someone mentioned that the German and Dutch word for lost was Veloren with 2 R's.
Gotcha.
Yeah, 2 R's. And then for some reason the R got dropped.
It's usually how these things happen.
Why.
You just gotta pick something. I can't say that Savvy Nick, I have no idea why I use that. Actually, I think it's someone from college actually gave me that name, Savvy, and then I just threw Nick on the end of that and called it a day. Nothing complicated about it. Not like I spent hours thinking about it, you know? Let's see here. We got another member question. What kind of inspired you to help at least start developing Veloren itself?
So the game is inspired by a previous game known as Cube World, which was a game written by a developer that sort of went away. I'm not sure exactly the details of why they decided to stop developing or pause developing, but the game had a very long period where there were no updates and so on. Because it was written in C++, I believe anyway, it's quite hard to reverse engineer or mod and so on.
Sure.
And a lot of the community felt that I think it could be improved in a number of ways. And so I suggested to the community one day, why don't we have a go at cloning this? And it was only a sort of a half serious suggestion. I'd just done my final exam from uni, I think a few days prior, and I was feeling a bit kind of lost and looking for another project. And then it became far larger than I ever expected.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool, actually. It's a good way to get started. Sounds like you were kind of almost bored, and then you're like, oh, let's try haphazardly. Oh, let's try, developing something. There's this game that used to sit around. Yeah, that's actually a pretty cool way to start.
I'm a strong believer that it's good to be bored from time to time, because boredom is the thing that triggers curiosity, and curiosity is the thing that triggers lots of interesting possibilities and so on.
No, I can absolutely agree with you, and I think
I would encourage everyone to try to practice occasional boredom.
Yeah, you need to take some time off. If anyone tells you to constantly just keep working, you're gonna get burned out too. So
yeah,
at least that's what happens to me occasionally. So that's wise advice there. Wise advice. Let's see here. We're getting very close to our destination. The as we're gonna call it, the second layer of doom here in Veloren. We're about to figure out whether or not it's actually comparable to our good old Berkwin crib. All right, so we're gonna fly down there. Just gonna say
circle of hell. Here we go.
The fifth circle of hell, as Josh likes to call it. We're gonna read some chat off. Do you? Let's see. Du's got a question. We'll come back around. Maybe it's been answered already. We got a lot of people. I just want to say hi to everyone. And if you're just joining in, we're having an interview here with an open source game developer who is very experienced, as we can tell, trying to make their own programming language, and sounds like they've been quite successful. And
I pretend to be anyway.
We all pretend to be something, right? But yeah, it's been so far so great. So we'll keep continuing with the questions. I just want to ask everyone to smash that like button if they haven't already. And also think about subscribing below. We'll have more of these in the future. And I want to say thank you again, Josh, for joining us today. We're about to enter into this beautiful Dungeon of Doom. Let's see if we can take it on. I think we got a good party going here. We lost MK. I don't know what happened to MK. MK, if you're still in the chat, if you come back, let me know. All right. Going down the layer here. Let's see. So, can you tell us a little bit about the game engine here in Veloren and what it is developed on? I kind of already know the answer to this one, but I think a lot of people are going to be shocked.
So, I, like most of the other devs of the game, I'm a bit of a masochist. I think that writing engines from scratch is really fun. I really love the technical challenge, and I think a lot of the other devs do as well. So the engine is written from scratch.
Oh wow!
From scratch is probably a bit too broad of a term. We use certain pieces that are common throughout the Rust ecosystem. We use other libraries, but we don't really use anything that's particularly too high level.
Right. That's amazing.
The components we do use are generic enough to be applicable to a lot of different projects. So I'd still probably consider it a custom engine.
No, absolutely. I think you could definitely take that. That's amazing. So I know that this has been asked in the past, but is there a specific name for the system? For the game engine, I should say.
Oh, the engine itself?
Yes.
Not really, no. I mean, it's just part and parcel with the game, I guess.
There you go. So you
in
can
the
call
same way that... Yeah, in the same way that maybe like prior to the 90s, you didn't really have a concept of a game engine as such. I would say that probably historically speaking, the Quake engine was the first proper engine that got reused a lot. But prior to then, games were generally written from the ground up each time.
Yeah, right.
Which is how Veloren was done.
Yeah, and it's quite amazing how games have kind of evolved from that, you know? Whereas now you kind of have engines, and a lot of people just use those engines to develop their games. So it's a very interesting take. Go ahead.
I would hasten to add that there's absolutely no shame in using an engine. I think a lot of engines are very powerful and mean that you can get right to the core of the thing that you're trying to build, which is the game itself. And I think if that's what you want to do, then
right.
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's definitely a trade-off. I mean,
That's
you have
just
efficiency.
enjoy the challenge.
Blue Falcon. Oh, someone might want that. You're just gonna let it roam there? Coco Rum's thinking about it. Better grab that. All right. Let's see.
Goodness, it's cultist warlock here.
These dungeons have become so much better to play in. It's so exciting now that we can. It just becomes so much harder, and you know, you really need a party now in order to like kind of get through this, or else you're just dying, spawning back at the top. I love the fact that you remove the team removed the campfires, so you can't just like keep spawning in the middle of the dungeon, and then also just these newer creatures, as well as they've become more powerful, and the AI has really started to shine. I gotta say, I like that. They're way more intelligent.
What I'm really excited for is when we get the AI to a point where you can actually start to hire NPCs and so on to go on quests with you and stuff like that.
Whoa.
Spend time in the dungeon as well.
Whoa.
Interestingly, that was actually already a feature for a certain amount of time,
Okay.
and no one knew about it apart from one of the other devs.
Okay.
It was just not mentioned for, I think, about an entire release cycle. It was actually possible to recruit other NPCs and have them run around with you.
Wow.
But it was deemed to be a bit overpowered and buggy. So
That's still really cool. So that's something we
removed
can.
pending improvements.
Gotcha. So it's something maybe we can expect in the future, huh?
Oh yeah, I mean, my intention for the game is to create an interesting and dynamic world where players aren't really above NPCs. You're more just a part of the world, the same way that they are.
Gotcha. So you're kind of playing in parallel with
and
them.
Part of that is making sure that NPCs can do pretty much anything a player can do, and that would include going on quests and so on, and trying to defeat a dungeon and trading and so on.
And let's see, we got CC Gouch saying, can Josh speak a little bit about Forge? I'm not familiar with what Forge is, or maybe that's not
Forge.
even. Yeah.
Forge.
Maybe that's not something I.
The mod loader. Oh. Maybe they're referring to a very old programming language project of mine.
Gotcha.
I tried to make sort of JavaScript, but with Rust-like syntax.
Mm-hmm.
And I created a language that was kind of designed for modding and scripting and so on. But
well, that's
it's
cool.
quite old now.
Well, how many languages have you tried creating at this point?
Very good. I mean, I think if you ask any language developer, they'll tend to say, well, yes, I'm constantly creating new languages and trying out new ideas, so it's kind of just an occupational thing.
Right. It's one of those things you're constantly improving upon, right? Let's see here. All right, man, we're destroying this dungeon. There's nothing that can stop us here. Well, this is just a joke. I gotta say, this is not the Dungeon of Doom. The Dungeon of Doom still belongs to Berquin over here, Crib. That thing's hard, I gotta say. A bunch of those.
5 times the power with 5 players.
It helps, but we were getting wrecked. We weren't doing too well with 7 people last time, I gotta say. That one is very hard. That Berquin Quint or whatever. I think those difficulty levels need to be reset. Oh man. All right.
There's a lot of tweaks that need making.
No, this is it. I'm just joking around, of course. But let's see, for the questions coming from members, we have. Okay, this one's a little weird to me. I'm not sure that this makes much sense to me, so maybe it makes sense to you. If not, we'll just move on. How do you optimize ESP with multiple threads? I don't know what that acronym stands for. Do you have any idea?
ESP. Extended stack pointer. I'm going to assume it's not that. ESP. I think that might need some clarification there.
Yeah, I agree with you. We'll move on.
So once I know what the acronym is.
Yeah. If you're in the chat, you can try expanding on top of that question. I didn't get to ask you to do that. So again, if you're in chat, you can expand on that. But we'll move on. So is Rust a good first programming language? This one I'm very interested in.
I think the answer to that depends on what you want to get out of programming. Because I think in some contexts it can be. The documentation is very good, which is important if you're new to a language. Mm-hmm. It's fairly well designed. But if you're just trying to, output some text or play with some high-level ideas, maybe it's not the first thing to go to. For example, it requires you to manually manage memory, kind of, and that's a thing that newcomers might not feel too keen on getting into at first. But if you're looking to learn how to program in a principled and correct way from the beginning, then it might be worth it as a first language.
That's
I definitely encourage you to give it a look anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So overall, yes. Let's see.
Yes, but with caveats.
Yeah, exactly. As is almost anything. So I think we got a little bit of clarification actually on the question. So ESP is just, I think, supposed to stand for especially. So how do you optimize, especially with multiple threads?
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, that makes way more sense to me.
This is an interesting question that actually has quite a lot of relevance to Veloren. So we actually had an old version of the engine that we completely rewrote between the 0.1 release and the 0.2 release. Basically from the ground up, an entirely new repository, started writing everything again. And the reason for that was that we made some mistakes with the multi-threading model of the previous engine. I was personally quite new to multi-threaded programming. I'd done a bit of it here and there, but I'd never really tried to design an architecture that revolved around multi-threading. And so we tried to parallelize different individual components and have them all communicate in kind of a network, I guess. A bit like a network, but inside the computer, where they'd all communicate between different channels and so on. And this is actually quite hard to do correctly because a game engine involves processing a lot of data. It's not really about communication between components. It's about taking a lot of data and doing a lot of math on it extremely quickly, and managing to do that all within the tick budget. That means you hit your desired frame rate. So that sort of design is much more suited to what's called the fork join model, which is where you take a piece of data that needs batch processing. So for example, let's say you're trying to do the physics code, and for each entity in the game, you're trying to apply the velocity to the position of the entity. So every frame you increment the position according to the velocity. And this is a thing that you can split up into multiple parts, right? Because each entity doesn't need to know about the position of other entities. It only needs to know about its own position and its own velocity.
Right.
So what the fork join model does is it says that you should spawn off multiple threads, usually using something called a thread pool, which is basically just a way to reuse threads. You should process a section of your entity list, and then at the end you should join all the threads together again and continue executing on the main thread. And this means that there's absolutely minimal communication between threads, because that turns out to be a really expensive thing actually.
Gotcha.
You want to minimize your communication, minimize your synchronization points, as it's called. So you have each of the threads trying to run as independently as possible, where possible, and then right at the end you join them all together, and so you're sure that they've all completed prior to the physics tick ending or whatever, and you moving on to the next frame of the game's execution. And so this new engine uses the fork join model a lot more, and it also uses a thing called an ECS, which is an entity component system, where I won't go into exactly what that does, but it means you store data in a way that makes it really easy to parallelize stuff and really easy to process things in bulk. It's really friendly to the CPU's cache, which means basically it's just very fast at doing batch operations. And this seems to be working a lot better now. I've not felt like the engine has any critical problems for quite a long time now, which is a nice sign, because I'm usually quite a perfectionist.
Well, that's good to hear. So the limitations are very low, huh?
Yeah, I mean, there are always occasional things that need improving and fixing.
Sure.
But it's nothing that's critical to the wider design of the engine.
Right. Awesome. All right. Let's see here. We got KTNXD joining in. Thank you so much for stopping by. Low Spec, hey, how are you? Good morning to you. Thank you for stopping in. We are interviewing here with Josh, a open source contributor, developer for the Veloren project, as also many of their own projects, of course. And we're just having some fun here in Veloren, playing around, having a good time, having an awesome party. Hopefully everyone else in the chat is having a great time. Go ahead and smash that like button if you are. KTNXD is asking who wants a ban. Nobody, hopefully. All right. Let's see. We'll move on to the next question. Again, thank you so much, Josh, for doing this. I'm having a great time. Let's see. Why did developers choose Rust as the language for Veloren? Wouldn't it be much more conventional to use something like C++?
I mean, as I said before, I think Rust comes with a lot of advantages, and
Right.
I
think you kind of answered this before, honestly.
Critical thing that I've seen really is that the memory safety aspect of the language means that when you're reviewing a piece of code, you don't need to take into account sort of spooky action at a distance that might occur if you had undefined behavior. So
right.
In a language like C, you can write an array out of bounds, for example.
Sure.
And it can trigger all kinds of problems. It can be a critical security hole, or it can make a completely unrelated part of the engine break, or the typical example is that it can make nasal demons appear out of your nose, which is a funny way of saying that the compiler is permitted to do absolutely anything if you trigger undefined behavior.
Right.
And Rust, at least normal safe Rust, doesn't permit you to trigger undefined behavior. The compiler will use a mixture of compile time and runtime checks to prevent that. And it means that when you're reviewing code from a contributor that's maybe a bit new to the language or new to the project, you don't need to have that same incredibly thorough expertise in order to understand the implications of a change.
Right.
You can pretty much review it in isolation, and that's really powerful because it means that the engine as a whole remains more stable, and new contributors can work on things, and you can work on things in parallel a lot easier without needing to think about all of the complicated ways in which things might interact on a technical level.
Perfectly said. That's a big reason to especially use Rust in open source then. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a really powerful tool in the future.
Absolutely.
For working on large projects like that.
Yeah, and can you, for my curiosity, speak a little bit about using Rust in kind of like embedded development? So for, maybe microprocessors, stuff like that. Are there availability for different architectures besides, x86?
Yes, I've got a bit of experience with this, given
perfect.
I wrote an OS kernel, which isn't quite the same as embedded, but you need to get rid of the standard library and so on, and write a lot of assembly code to go with it. So
right.
It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Rust is pretty good at that, yeah. It has good, so it's got a mode that you can switch to called NoSTD, where the standard library basically doesn't exist, and you only get access to a core library. And the core library consists of things that can be implemented without an operating system. So these are things like atomic operations, or basic conversion traits, or whatever, or math-related stuff.
Yeah.
And the language can fit really nicely onto an architecture like that. There is a Rust embedded working group, so a group of people that work on making Rust a lot better to use in the embedded world, and they're creating a lot of great stuff. I think it's now possible to pretty much write Rust for an embedded device without using any unsafe code at all, actually.
Really?
And just by using basically a set of libraries that provide all of the complicated stuff like interrupt handling and so on.
Yes.
And that's nice because the more unsafe code you can avoid, the better. It means it's
Absolutely.
a lot easier to review.
Well,
you're not likely to blow things up.
Right, the stability. That is very important.
The case in embedded. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's good news because that's something that truly interests me. I do work with a lot of embedded systems, so it's something that I've been keeping an eye on. So I'm very interested in how over the next couple of years, Rust comes into that kind of that portion of programming with embedded devices. So I'll be definitely keeping an eye out on that. So I'm very interested. I'm with you on this. So let's see here, another question. So this one I think I could probably answer fairly quickly, so we can move on to other questions. We have, what is the in-game story, or does it even have one yet? I thought I just saw on the latest blog post a little bit about this. So if you want to check that out, check out Veloren.net. Make sure to first download the game and then come join in the fun. And then when you get some time, go read some lore. So I don't know if you want to add in anything on that, but I believe I saw something there.
So what I did was I wrote a sort of a short story of a sort of experience I'd like players to have, maybe in like a year's time or something with the game, because it's still a pre-alpha.
Right.
It's extremely visible, of course. But lore-wise, the intention, where possible, is to make the game generate all of that stuff. So,
wow.
Information about cultures and groups and so on will be simulated over maybe a few hundred years in game. And cool. When you start to play the game, all of that history will already have occurred, and you'll be able to experience ruins and so on that actually relate to the history of the world. And,
wow.
I'm sure if people have played Dwarf Fortress, they'll understand what I'm trying to go for here.
Gotcha.
It's very in depth, and you don't necessarily need to see that complexity, but if you want to see it, then it's there, and you'll be able to start to dig into the details of the world works. There's still a huge amount to do on that front at the moment. At the moment, the world is still fairly shallow, really. We're starting to get parts of the simulation appearing. There's currently some ongoing work on excuse me. There's currently some ongoing work on economy simulation. So we're going to have an economy that you can interact with as a player when trading. It'll be based on the NPC economy, so you have realistic prices for certain places. If you have a town on the coast of an ocean, for example, you'll have cheaper fish there. You'll be able to trade them with towns up in the mountains and make a profit or whatever. I think most of all, the bit that really interests me, and the bit that's going to be quite difficult, is making all of that stuff appear in a principled way, so without needing to hard code it.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that. And again, if anyone wants to read up on that, make sure to check out the latest blog post. It's officially blog post number 100. 100 weeks of blog posts on Bellerin. Quite amazing. What is that? That's about 2 years worth. So if you want to read up on the development, make sure to check out Veloren.net. Also, make sure to subscribe below and hit that notification bell for more streams, interviews, programming videos, Linux, what have you. So also, if you haven't, destroy that like button. Thank you so much. and we will be moving on with the questions. If you're still happy going with this, I know I don't want to keep you too long, of course. So
I know it's fine. It's
okay,
fine.
awesome. So let's see here. Here's a silly question. What are what are the huge skeletons scattered across the map?
Huge skeletons. So they're, I guess, an attempt at creating a bit of intrigue. They've been in the game for a while now. They don't have any particular meaning other than that they're interesting to look at. But I think in time, I think I speak for the rest of the devs when I say that we'd like to make them part of the game in some way. So maybe have creatures that actually look like those skeletons.
Oh wow, that'd be kind of cool, gotta say. All right.
So, I know we recently gained the larger Donto creatures.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty big and probably off that kind of scale. But yeah, there's not really any lore associated with them yet. But the plan eventually is to have them be less temporary and more actually rooted in the lore of the world as it generates over time.
Right. Well, awesome. Yeah, I think they're cool. I love checking them out and just hanging outside and inside of them, trying to imagine what kind of a mob died here. All right, so we also have a question, another member question. How much of this game is inspired by Cube World? Or is any of it, honestly?
I mean, it started life as a clone, and visually, of course, it looks pretty similar. Mechanically, we've definitely started to deviate more and more from it. And there's a few updates on the horizon that are going to be added quite soon, such as an inventory overhaul and also skill trees that are going to move us away from the design of Cube World quite a bit.
It's awesome to hear.
I personally love the aesthetic of Cube World, but I think there was more to work on gameplay wise, and I hope we're going to cover that in time.
Awesome. All right, let's see here. Let's make a plan for when we get out of this dungeon of gloom, as I'm going to call it, since the other one's Dungeon of Doom, this one's of Gloom. So let's see about heading. So we've explored the mountains. It's a nice little lake. I'm thinking we go down, follow this path into the, I'll call it the Savannah Desert here. Check out the little lake and make our way around the desert. There seems to be quite a bunch of cool stuff down here. Maybe even make our way to the east. Perfect. All right.
What I might do is I might speed up time so that we can get the dawn and the sun rising.
Ooh, all right.
That's okay with you?
Oh, I'm perfectly fine with that. That sounds awesome to me. All right.
Let's go to 5:30 in the morning.
5:30. Cool. All right.
So a thing I added recently was the ability for lakes and rivers on the level of detail terrain to actually reflect light.
Oh, yes.
So you can see now the rivers actually look like water off into the distance.
Yeah, it looks absolutely gorgeous, and so is that Aurora Borealis that I keep seeing. Those really add a lot to the game. It's quite beautiful. All right, let's head east. Very cool. So is Veloren going to be an MMORPG or MMO sandbox? Or is it just going to be an MMO platform for others to make their own stories? Is there any kind of word on that, thoughts about it, or?
So there are a few things to answer here.
Okay.
When it comes to MMO stuff, there is, I guess, a fundamental limit in that the terrain generation occurs on the server side, and it needs to, because of course that stuff will increasingly be subject to things like world simulation stuff. So you can't recreate it on the client side only in a deterministic way.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean we can't later add things like instancing. So an idea that's been floated is a federated model where you'd have servers that would opt into being within the same group, and you'd be able to travel through portals between those servers as long as they're in the same group.
Gotcha.
So through that, you could probably have many thousands of people in the same, not server, but in the same economy, in the same space. Or something else I was going to say, but I've completely forgotten it. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of optimization to do.
Gotcha.
During the release party, we had, I think it was about 120 people online.
Yeah. It was big.
Which was quite a lot. And the server was beginning to struggle, as you could see. It didn't quite explode, but it was definitely straining itself. But I think with some optimization, it wouldn't be that strange to imagine us having maybe a few hundred players on a server at any one time, maybe even up to 500.
Oh, wow.
On a larger server, which is enough probably for it to count as an MMO.
Yeah. I would think
just
so.
about. Yeah, so I guess you can think of it as an MMO. Maybe in time.
Right. So, I mean, at the worst, it's going to eventually, you know, it has the possibility. Let's just say that. Let's see here. We are losing a few of our members. I'm not sure. Is it lagging for you a little bit?
It doesn't seem to be for me.
Interesting. I gotta look at my 6.5. Yeah, I'm starting to get down a little bit. Interesting. There we go. That's better. No, you're all good. So let's see. There is still plenty more questions. Surprisingly, we got an overwhelming amount of questions. Thank you so much for everybody who had submitted a question. We're trying to get around to most of them, if not all of them. Let's see. So we're trying, first before we do that, we're trying to head over to this savannah. If we go towards the ingest layer, I think we'll make it to where we want to go. Here's some new trees. I know that these have been added in, I don't know, it hasn't been too long ago. I think this is one of Sarah's contributions, if I'm right. I'm not 100% sure.
It might be, yeah.
Yeah, they look very cool.
I've been mostly taking the last month or so away from the game. So
yeah, taking some time off.
It'd be nice to see a lot of new things being added and then coming back to the game.
Yeah, that's why I love coming in.
Has this been added?
Yeah, I love coming in weekly and just kind of seeing stuff because it's always something new, you know? That's what I love about this. Let's see here. So, will there be more classes being added to Veloren, or are we kind of classed out where we need to be?
So what I would say is that we're trying to avoid thinking of them as classes. I mean, I guess you could sort of see them as that, but they're more like individual tools.
Yes.
Broadly, they come under weapons at the moment, but
right.
In time, I'd like to see things like us treating things like a fishing rod with the same sort of weight as a sword.
Right.
And being able to improve your skills in fishing and so on, or being able to become a blacksmith, and interact with the world in all of these ways that don't necessarily involve bashing the face of an orc in or something like that. Which is fun from time to time, but I think there's a lot more value in giving players a choice of ways to interact with the world.
Right. And one thing I really do appreciate about the game right now, at least, is the fact that you can go between classes. You know, what I traditionally consider classes, you know, mage, buffer, debuffer, assassin, archer, all that stuff, right? So currently, there's really not like, at least in my mind, there's not one character that is, benefits from, being a certain class. So I really like that. That's kind of new and refreshing, honestly.
So I think there are going to be some changes in that respect with the skill trees.
Right.
In that, if you start using a new weapon, of course, you're going to need to upgrade all the skill with that weapon.
Right.
So you won't be able to just like instantly switch. But there's not going to be a hard barrier between.
Right. That's what I like. Most games,
because I just don't think that's very fun, really.
Exactly. No, I'm in a complete agreement, and a lot of
to need to completely recreate a character to try out a different way of playing the game.
Right. No, I truly appreciate that, and that's kind of what I'm talking about, and the fact that no one character benefits from being a specific class. Okay, so
yeah, so the gameplay right now is pretty much balanced around the assumption that players are using two weapons. So we tend to assume that players are using both a melee weapon and a ranged weapon, and that they're able to switch between them and so on. So I personally find that that's the most fun way to play. And you can switch your weapons based on the enemy you're trying to fight.
Right. No, it's a cool way. It's a cool way. Sarah says, but bashing in orc faces is fun. Thanks for that one,
no
Sarah.
intention of removing that.
All right, so moving on. We're getting.
This makes me want to start more work on my town rework that I'm planning.
I love the towns. There's some really cool visuals when you're gliding in.
But I'd much prefer them to be more structured. I'm planning on having them have distinct zones and things like that, and you'll have distinct squares with paths between them, and buildings that actually have a dedicated purpose and give you a reason to walk into a town, maybe to do some blacksmithing and stuff like that, or to go trading in the market.
Nice. We're having people are revolting against the orcs over here. We got Fow saying, well, first off, just wait until we add small humanoids. That'll be interesting. And then they have such beatable little faces and are annoying enough to make it fun grilling them. Oh wow, someone's got something against some orcs. Maybe it's from some other games or something. That's hilarious.
So I think this is talking about a new skeleton. So in the game, we have these things known as skeletons, which are used to animate certain archetypes of characters. So we have the humanoid one, we have the quadruped one, we have the large biped one, so used for trolls and things like that. And a new one is being added at the moment. I think it's small biped, so the idea is it'll be used for things like imps and kobolds and whatever.
Gotcha. Well, that's cool.
So I'm quite excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, me too. And then we have the opposition. Joseph over here saying orcs for Congress 2021. So we have both sides. All right. We're being represented. That's all right. Let's see. We have, will there be passive classes? You kind of answered this, but like blacksmith, synthesis to make weapons and potions, alchemy, that type of deal.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't actually enjoy combat that much in games. It can be fun in the right context.
This is where me and you differ.
Yeah. I enjoy interacting with the world in a way that's more entertaining.
Yeah.
And makes it feel like you're not just this sort of invader come to colonize the world. You're actually a component of it in much the same way that the other NPCs are.
Right,
And
right.
that's the thing that I think has been missing a lot from a lot of games.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we already answered this one. Okay, how about this one? How can a novice programmer contribute to the Bellerin community? I'm sure there's a lot of people out there wondering.
Yeah, there are loads of ways. So we have quite a few people that are learning Rust as they work on the project. And they're using it as a way to get into the language. On the Discord, we've got a learning channel and a questions channel. So those are open for anybody to ask any questions. It doesn't even need to be related specifically to Veloren.
Yeah.
They're happy to answer all kinds of programming or
Right, and
technical things. We also have an issue tracker that is probably not updated as much as it should be, but there's a lot of interesting things on there, a lot of things that are suitable for beginners to work on. If you're not on Discord, if you don't like Discord's terms of service, which is completely understandable, there's also Matrix server, which I believe is now bridged to the Discord.
oh, nice.
I don't know how well it works. I think there are some teething issues with it, but I think it broadly works. So that's also another way that you can get involved with the community.
Perfect. And
yeah, if you're curious,
yeah,
just ask.
yeah, absolutely. Make sure to stop by Veloren.net. Check out the Discord channel. It's full of very friendly and a nice community of developers. And
you don't even need to know how to code or even be interested in code. There's a lot of artwork that he's doing, a lot of testing.
Perfect. I was just about to ask.
Come up with new ideas for different abilities and stuff like that.
Right.
All of that stuff is useful. There are quite a lot of roles that we have for people that want to get involved.
Beautiful. So you heard it here. Make sure to, again, check out Veloren.net. Get on that Discord channel. You can help contribute. You don't have to be a programmer necessarily. And if you're just beginning, again, a very helpful community over there. The perfect place to start programming. And there are many roles, like Josh said. You know, you could do testing for the game. You could, well, I'm sure you could do media. You could do artwork. You could do all sorts of stuff. There's a sound effects team. There's all sorts of different contributors to this game. I've heard that you've had over 100 contributors at this point, so that's quite amazing.
I think if you go through the Git logs, had probably at least a few hundred individual people contributing, and we have at least probably 30 or 40 people with a significant number of commits. So
nice.
Yeah, it's quite a large community, but that doesn't mean that your input isn't useful, of course.
Right. And what I also like is, you know, again, like newcomers, you guys, everyone at the community actually treats them very well. You know, it's not just, oh, ignore this person, you know, they're new, we don't want to waste our time. It's quite the opposite.
At one point, right?
100% agreed. 100% agreed. And but the problem is, not many people see it that way. They get kind of lost, you know. So that's what the really refreshing part of the whole community is. So again, make sure to check it out.
I have many memories of asking people that were far cleverer than I was how to do things on IRC and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's nice to have mentors, is what I've learned throughout the days.
Yeah.
All right, so there is a question about, and this is, of course, kind of opinionated, but what is the significance of math in game development? So mathematics, is it highly important? Is it something you can kind of, you know, do without if you really didn't need to? Go ahead.
So it is important. For example, I use vector maths basically on a daily basis when I'm working on the game. Geometry in particular is really useful. That's a pretty essential part of everything from rendering to physics to writing a combat system and so on.
Right.
It doesn't have to be hard maths though, and it doesn't have to be a scary thing either.
Right.
There is quite a lot of information online nowadays about this kind of maths.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of YouTube documentation and so on that will help you get into the sort of maths you need.
Right.
And a lot of it just comes through learning on the job, as it were.
Right.
You'll try to solve a problem, and you'll ask a person if there's a better way of doing things, and then you'll learn a new way of doing things. You'll learn a new technique and so on. It's not like maths is a totally fundamental part of doing game design.
Right.
But it's a useful tool to have in your tool belt when you're trying to work out what is possible, what isn't possible, and how you might go about implementing things, even if you don't know the whole picture. So, yeah. Yeah,
I think that's a great way of putting it, honestly. It's nice to have, but not essential. Let's see. So what do you think makes Veloren stand out against other games in the sandbox RPG genre?
Right now, I think it's more based on its potential than anything else. We're still in a pre-alpha state, very much so. There are quite a few things we have that are fairly unique, actually. So, firstly, the engine is really portable. It runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux, but it also has been known to run on other platforms. We had someone get it working on a Raspberry Pi and a hacked version of the Nintendo Switch. It runs on BSD as well.
Nice.
Also, a lot of the things in game, such as the world generation, is quite new. So the way the world is generated through an erosion process is fairly unique. To my knowledge, it's the most complicated and detailed erosion simulation that's been implemented into a game as of yet.
Oh wow.
Even surpassing games like Dwarf Fortress in that respect.
Yeah.
And it tends to create pretty beautiful landscapes. I don't think I've seen a voxel engine that does like a level of detail thing like we do. For instance, you can't see mountains kilometers off into the distance in Minecraft, or not very easily anyway, whereas you can here, of course, and all of that is tied into the fact that we pre-generate parts of the world and we do erosion simulation of the world, and I think in time as the project grows, those aspects are only going to become more and more magnified, and we'll start to see some really interesting and unique stuff appearing in the world that just isn't possible in alternative procedural games like Minecraft and so on, just because they don't try to generate things in the same way.
Yes. No, it's one thing I love about the game is how beautiful it is. I'm always awed by everything inside the game. I really enjoy, that's one of the biggest reasons I enjoy it. I just like exploring, and just the visual detail is amazing, that's all.
I think on a personal level, my intention is to persuade those people that have been unconvinced of procedural generation's ability to create interesting content. And I'm trying to persuade them that yes, actually it can be a pretty useful tool, and it can be the foundation of a game that is interesting to play beyond just, cut and pasted content, as we often see with games that claim to be procedural. But as mentioned, we're not yet there at all.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see a couple things from the chat. I think we're still going on about the orcs. Orcs would do a better job than the curmudgeons in their now. And then we got Master Orc would do better than Trump or Biden. Now we're getting political. Come on. Let's keep the politics out of that chat.
Orc for president.
Orc for president 2021. Oh, man. Let's see. Yoda I haven't, or Yoda.
It's okay, it does work. Over in the UK, we've got an orc for a prime minister, so.
It's funny you mentioned that because Fal said, and that from a Brit, I'm impressed. So from earlier, for earlier mentions. Okay, so I haven't contributed quite any code yet, but I'm always teasing stuff other people make and trying to understand the code base. Building the game from source is very easy, so anyone can get into it. So there you go, first-hand experience from Yanamin. Thank you for that. All right.
Yeah. So just to
sure.
Just to build on that, we have this thing on the website we call the book, and it's a place where we add documentation relating to the game, and it gives you information on how to build the game from source. Right. On basically any platform. It teaches you how you can get into contributing things and how you can add certain things like new weapons or new abilities and stuff like that.
Sure.
There's a load of useful stuff on there on book.veloren.net.
Perfect. Yes, and I'm pretty sure if you just go to the Veloren.net website, you can just click on the top somewhere in the right-hand corner and you'll get to that book, right? It's called Manual, I believe, on the site? Yeah. Perfect. And
I think so, yeah. I think we should probably use a consistent name, but oh well.
No, it's all good. I just want to... easiest way to get to it then. And then, let's see. I don't know if you've noticed, but we have a beautiful Aurora Borealis in the background. Ooh. Excited about this. Oh, I got to tell you, it looks amazing. Always. So pretty. Adu says, I don't understand why Minecraft devs take 5 months to add bees, and Veloren devs take a week to add in 20 new mobs. Yeah, you're right. That's a good question. I don't understand that myself. And then Sarah Kitty, my contribution is pretty much all models so far have been getting into code that spawns plant sprites and things lately working underwater like underwater flora, coral, kelp, etc. Very cool. I'm very excited to see those, Sarah. Thanks for contributing to the Veloren community. I'm sure everybody's. I've this sand raptor. What do we call them? Sand raptor gliders. The one that I'm. One I got on right now is another thing that that they have developed. So thank you so much for that. Been showing that off quite a bit. Got some really good people on the team. All right, and I guess if you're ready for some more questions, I'll ask a few more.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure.
Yeah. What do you? Or actually, go ahead.
How about this for a minute?
Yeah.
Let me spawn a horse for each of us, and you can see the very in development version of mounting. If you come over to the horse and press F.
All right, we got an exclusive here.
This is
a horse called Wolf.
This is not really intended for view yet, but
this is cool.
It can't really do any harm. You can see it's still very buggy, but it's a more interesting way to explore.
Oh my gosh, absolutely! I love it. Love it. Welcome to an exclusive in Bellerin right now. We got horses and we're mounting them. Here with an interview with Josh from Veloren, a community member and a contributor, developer. All sorts of fun stuff here in Veloren. Make sure to check it out at veloren.net. Make sure to smash that like button. Make sure you subscribe for more of these in the future. Dang, these things can jump. We're in trouble now. We got a horse pack. Off into the beautiful Aurora Borealis. How cool. Thanks for this. Dang, they're fast too.
Yeah, so I really need to get around to actually fleshing out the mounting and turning it into a proper feature of the game. And pets as well. They're still they're still mostly an experimental thing. That's kind of a shame, actually, because I think they're quite a fun part of the game, or at least they could be.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. It could be a lot of fun, and I've been looking forward to it. I know you, like right now, you know, you can tame an animal with the collar, but then you lose it after a relog or anything like that, and
Yeah,
it would be really cool to
it's a
be
bit of
able
a
to have
shame.
this. It is a little bit, but at the same time, it shows you.
I think we might need to start like a pet working group or something in order to make sure we have a focus on improving it.
Yeah, it's definitely a nice tease. I'll give you that. Let's see.
Free to show the speed with the ball. Yeah. How fast can they go? I think actually in real terms they can travel basically as fast as a car.
Oh wow.
Which
we're not talking 100 miles an hour, are we? Actually, now that I'm watching it, I don't know if I'm lagging or something.
Like 50 or so, but it actually created a bit of a problem as I was writing the pathfinding code, because you'd plan a path for the NPCs to take, and they try to take it, but then they'd be moving so fast that they managed to fall off the path or something like that.
We just got in trouble. Oh, you found a way. Okay, we got up. Sorry, I was laughing at the fact that the horses were stuck in the water for a second there. That was awesome.
Yeah, they're not very good at climbing.
Oh no.
But I'd have the problem where I tried to get, say, like a wolf to pathfind over a roof or something like that, and they managed to fall off the roof every time. So that was quite an interesting problem to solve. I had to make them take into account both their current speed and also any turns that were coming up in the future path, and make sure that they slowed down in order to compensate for those turns and so on.
Yeah, quite interesting. It's absolutely it's cool. I love the horse. Oh my gosh, a sand raptor just killed Comcat's horse.
Oh
No!
You go, I'll give you a new one.
That was just funny because it came out of nowhere and just like drop kicked his horse into the water. Oh man, that was funny. Oh, that was awesome. Oh. We got
We're at the edge of the world now, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. It's quite beautiful here. We got Fow saying he shall be called the Josh from now on. I'm not sure where that came from, but that's funny. Let's see what else we got in the chat real quick. Sure, Veloren doesn't have the ability to build, but it would be great, and feature is already there by the do. Okay, F3, I did that for you. Fighting is nice, but building would be great. Okay. What else we got?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but we need to find the right way to fit it into the game, because obviously a lot of the gameplay at the moment is about moving around through the world and exploring, and we need to find a way to make sure that that doesn't conflict with the way in which building tends to encourage players to stay in the same place, for example.
Right. You know, I mean, I completely see that issue.
Yeah, so if we can somehow manage to reconcile those two things, an idea I've had, for example, is having like a cart that you can bring around, and you can sort of customize the cart or build up the cart, or you can own land in a town and then you can go back to the town and so on, and work on it there. I guess the question is whether we want to continue encouraging exploration all the time, or whether we want to give players the opportunity to settle down and play the game as they want within one place, but take into account the fact that that's likely to limit some of the other aspects of gameplay, like exploration.
Right. It's it's an interesting balance, and I'm sure that your whole team, the whole team and Bellerin, and you got to think about this a lot, is that that deal with balancing things, and I could see it being. You know what's really interesting about this game is that it is so beautiful everywhere that it almost draws you to build in different places just because of the beauty. I mean, I'd want a mount or a house in the mountains as well as by the beautiful end of the world, the ocean as I consider it, and the lakes, and you got the savannah. I mean, it's just so many places. You're fine.
Yeah.
So that's already a bonus.
I definitely would like to get something like that in, and a lot of people have expressed interest in it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I never really thought about it.
If you're interested in thinking about that and implementing it, then feel free to join the Discord, and you can be the one that helps to start getting the ball rolling on it. Because ultimately the project is only as good as its contributors, of course.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good plug.
But,
get on that Discord right now. Did you see this tree thing? What in the? Yeah, you missed it. Go backwards. I think you'll want to see this
tree that's by the water.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it necessarily just a tree. It's like a castle tree that's it's kind of generated. It's messed up.
Castle tree.
Yeah, you'll see what I mean when you come here. It's actually considered a town, I think. Is it or a dungeon? Oh, it's a dungeon.
Castle tree.
Yeah, if you come back.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I love these. So these are one of the dungeon entrances, and it was generated on the slope, so it doesn't look quite as good.
Yeah.
When it's generated on the flat, they look pretty great.
Wow.
So you can climb all the way up. It's quite interesting, actually, if you go inside.
Jeez. Yeah, I gotta say, I haven't seen this before.
You can climb up the side, and there's an entire...
Okay, here we go. F.
Temple inside.
I'm gonna check this out. Something new. If I can get up here.
And there's also an entrance in here.
Oh, yes. Thank you. That's much easier. Oh, wow. Amazing.
I'm hoping that with some work, we can improve dungeons to the state that they start to look like this throughout.
That's cool. It's really cool.
I've long had a dungeon overhaul on my to-do list.
You got a lot on your to-do list, I can tell.
Maybe sometime before Easter I'll get to it. Yes, it's a very long list. I'm not very good at getting through it particularly fast.
All right. We got Fine Wine saying that they're currently learning Rust right now, just the basics for now. Well, Fine Wine, it's a perfect time to get on the Veloren Discord channel where you can ask some questions. All right, so let's see. I think we have one last question as far as members go, and maybe I'll ask a couple of my own.
Yeah.
Unless,
So, as Yon Dame said in the chat, dungeons do actually try to level the ground around them, and you might notice the ground just around the dungeon is a little flatter, but unfortunately it doesn't quite take into account the size of the dungeon entrance.
Right.
Which is a bit too large in this case. So.
Yeah.
Maybe that needs some work.
It's still really cool that that design there for that dungeon. I really approve. I really like that. Emodu says the Rust documentation is really helpful and fun to use. Okay. All right. Let's see. I don't know where the others have gone. I think they've just been cruising down the path. Now that you've given them horses, there's no stopping them. Explore the whole map within minutes. These things are quick. It's awesome. This one's kind of...
Personally, I'd much prefer to have mounts instead of something like a fast travel mechanic, because it encourages you to just take a look at the world as you go.
Yes. And I would be in agreement with you, honestly. I think more people are, wondering about it just because they don't have the option of doing it right now. You know, I think if this became a you know, something in the official game, that I don't see a reason to even need teleportation necessarily.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Wow, this mountainside is really it's got some switchbacks to it.
Yeah,
So
hairpins.
cool. Love it. It's going up, 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 and away. All right, so let's see if we have this last question here from the member community. How do you define which mythological creatures make it into the game, and how do they fit into the lore? The current ones mostly look like they're from European lore. What's that?
I think it's mostly just someone makes a model and we add it, pretty much. I mean, it's not particularly heavily regulated. I don't think it needs to be honest.
Yeah.
If you want to see a creature in the game and it's broadly applicable to the setting, then I see no reason with adding. I see no problem with adding it.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement.
It might be worth talking to some of the animators who are usually quite involved with this on the Discord.
Right. Let's see. Well, I think that as far as the member questions go, that pretty much sums it up for the member questions. I'm having a great time. So again, I don't want to keep you too long. So if I think we could wrap it up if you're ready.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. So we have been going for an hour and 36 minutes, if you can imagine that. Goes by quickly. At least it did for me. I hope you enjoyed this one, Josh, and I hope the whole community here as well enjoyed it. Thanks so much for taking your time and doing this interview. It's been great. Again, much appreciated. Thank you so much for this. I hope to do more. If you had any last, kind of remarks that you wanted to make, or anything else that you would want to recommend to beginners, go ahead.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course.
It's been really enjoyable.
Good.
I'll just say, if you want to get involved, feel free. Don't feel like there's some large barrier that you need to surpass first, or that you need to be an expert in any particular thing. Even if you just want to join because you just want to play the game and want to hear about updates from the community, the community is also a place for players to discuss things and so on. So it's open to everyone, and it's a bunch of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very awesome of you.
I think it's a bit of a life. I think that it's a bit of a light relief.
Yeah.
From the terrible things that have been occurring this year.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
It's not exactly been a fun year for anyone, so. Right. It's nice to have a distraction.
For sure. A nice lighthearted and fun distraction, in my opinion. No, that's great. Again, thank you so much for the contributions that you've made to the open source world, as well as, of course, Veloren. And it's people like you who really, they give their time, and it's much appreciated because you make amazing things like this, and without you, we wouldn't have stuff like this. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for joining in on this. I know that this was kind of last minute. I mean, we kind of put this together pretty quick. So again, thanks for being patient. Thanks for showing us. Thank you for answering all the questions. I'm sure that many people enjoyed this on our stream today. I hope to have more of these. I got to tell you already, we're breaking all sorts of records here. Most likes I've had on a stream, and most views, playbacks, watch time. It's amazing. I'll probably be sharing some of those stats with you just so you can see how well this was perceived. So again, thank you so much, Josh. Thank you everyone in the chat.
You have a good day.
You too. Thank you everyone in the chat. Again, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, make sure to post them in the comments section below. Also, make sure to subscribe for future videos and make sure to like the video. Catch me in a great community on Discord, and I hope to have more of these videos here. Thanks again, Josh, and talk to you later.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.
See you later, everybody.